Biz Buzz on Marlow FM 97.5.
And good afternoon and welcome to the Biz Buzz programme. This is Dermot Fitzpatrick with you for the next 19 minutes, and I'm delighted to be joined in the studio this afternoon by my co-guest presenters, Wisdom the Costa and Malcolm Parr, and we're going to be dissecting, analysing and commenting on the Chancellor's budget from yesterday, looking at is it smoke and mirrors, is it just a means of spiking the Labour Party's run for the election, or is it a genuine attempt to look after the care and needs of all the hard-working people in this country of ours? We'll be back in a few moments after we listen to Oh Happy Days. Welcome if you've just joined us to the Biz Buzz programme. Joining me as co-presenters this afternoon, we've got Wisdom and Malcolm. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Dermot.
Oh, so are we ready to rock and roll with the Chancellor's budget?
You bet.
What do you think?
Absolutely.
It's a good one?
It was a very interesting one, yes. I think the jury's out. The different papers have looked at it.
Let's have
different angles.
Let's go through the papers and see what angles the papers have chosen.
Should I give you the headlines from some of the papers?
Okay.
So the Sun have said George's epic strut with a picture of George Osborne in high heels and a pair of jean shorts showing his legs and his booty, saying UK booming, jobs at a record high. The Daily Mail says the sun shines on savers. The Telegraph was a bit more measured, saying the end of tax on savings. And of course the FT was definitely a little bit more balanced. Osborne eases austerity in bid to spike Labour's election guns. So perhaps hinting at what the budget is really delivering. And then of course you've got the Mirror, the madness of George, and hush money, what George is not telling us about the budget. So a range of headlines there.
So give us your own overview on what you would say about the budget, because your background is accountancy, so you know about these things. You're not giving us a professional opinion here. You're just giving us your Marlow FM volunteers, co-presenters view.
Yeah, I think he's literally trying to sort of buy certain aspect of voters, taking money from the bankers who are a nice, easy target, taking it away from people who've got high levels of pensions, and giving it to other areas. Spending one penny cut in your pint, so that will save me, well, at least 5 pence a week, I suppose. Just showing my drinking habits there. But on the plus side, there are promises of simplification of tax, and I think that's much needed. We have a ridiculously complicated system in the UK. I shouldn't really say that because, of course, the complexity keeps me in work. Because
that's your speciality is tax account.
Yeah, absolutely. And good news for self-employed. If you're a self-employed sole trader, Class 2 national insurance is going to be going, so you're going to save yourself a whopping £2.75 a week very shortly. But it also, on a serious note, it is positive. You then have less administration to deal with, and administration is what really, really saddles and weighs down on the mind of businessmen. It
seems to me as if they've almost sat down and they've taken the various people, the constituent parts of the electorate, from people with pensions to people going to buying first-time homes, to people saving, to people in business, the oil industry, this industry, and they've actually kind of pinned them up and saying, what can we say, what can we do, or what can we say that will help us to get these people on board? Because there is an election coming up, and there is a kind of cynicism that perhaps it was a budget designed to spike the guns of the Labour Party.
Those are the FT's headlines.
This was the FT's headlines this morning, yeah. Malcolm, what's your comment on that?
And then day two, I think we're beginning to look ahead at the next 5 or 6 years. And the feeling I get is that there will be quite a lot of austerity. The government is still spending 90 billion more than it raises in taxes, and this will only be wiped out in about 2018.
So they're going to spend £90 billion more than they actually have?
Yes. The Chancellor, George Osborne, has denied his planned cuts after the general election would be tougher than the austerity of the past few years. But this is a point that's, I think, going to be picked up by the yellow briefcase the Lib Dems as they speak this afternoon.
What time is that going on?
I think it's just about now. I'm waiting for feedback on that.
We may see if we can find a news feed.
You raise a great point there, because one of the other newspapers, one of the tax commentators, said actually what George Osborne's doing is he's not spending or giving away money that we've got today, but he's giving away money that he hopes to get in the future.
I think so. Basically, in the last round of cuts in 2010, a lot of the cuts fell upon the Ministries of Justice, Defence, Communities, which provides money for councils and social care, and the Home Office and Foreign Office. And their funding's been slashed by a fifth or more, according to the BBC. The Home Office has coped best, but there's a lot of controversy there where, in the West Midlands, for example, they've been asked to report any misdemeanours by email, because they don't have the staff to follow things through or the people to man the telephones. Prisons are at bursting point, according to this article, and the MOD has cut the number of troops by 30,000 at a time of great global instability. So a lot is ahead, and I think the Lib Dems are actually going to be playing a little bit towards that.
It'll be interesting to see if the Lib Dems take up Jonathan Porteous' comment that what's not on offer in the real world is what David Cameron's promised, which is to cut tax, increase services, and no change at the NHS levels of delivery.
Well, it's pre-election time, and I suppose the answer will come post-election.
Okay, let's listen to some music while we regather our thoughts here on what we're going to cover next in this programme. We've been looking through the papers, looking at the Chancellor's budget yesterday, and I've picked an article called "The Madness of George Brings Us Families in Sunlight but No Rabbits." This is Anne Treneman from the Times. She writes, the Commons was heaving, the galleries were full. The Osmond family was there, peering down on what is left of the man who is always on a diet. The Peers Gallery was particularly impressive, for there in a row sat lords formerly known as Nigel Lawson, Peter Mandelson, Geoffrey Archer and Tory Party Chairman Andrew Feldman. It was frightening how they all looked more like spitting image puppets than themselves. It was a classic George Osborne speech, full of the kind of slightly mad things that he loves to say. He began with this: "Britain is walking tall again." I looked at his wraith-like form bent over the dispatch box. Can you hunch tall? If so, he was doing it. Surely, walking tall is the kind of thing they say in a Clint Eastwood movie. A line best delivered by someone wearing holsters. Actually, the whole thing doesn't bear thinking about. Britons aren't tall. We are medium-sized. Plus, we are couch potatoes, Google box nation. If anything, we sit tall. Now he announced another imperative. We choose the future, he announced. Do we? I'd always thought that the future was just out there, an inevitable factor of life. The universe and all that. George looked immensely pleased. I wondered, not for the first time, how long it takes him to come up with this stuff. And then, as if in rebuff to this thought, he repeated, "We choose the future." Okay, I thought, have it your own way. But then, like a sugaraholic in a sweet shop, he started choosing everything. A few of them made sense. We choose economic security, he said. We choose jobs. He didn't stop there. Soon we were choosing the whole nation and aspiration. And then my personal favourite came. We choose families, he said, although patently it is families that choose us. So now there we were, walking tall, choosing the future, and our families listening to George reading out a catalogue of numbers, each chosen to show his chancellorship had been a stunning success. Everyone always thinks budgets are about rabbits out of a hat. This year, there was a lack of rabbits. We do not choose rabbits. Instead, George gave us an intricate connect the numbers exercise that was aimed to make austerity look less austere. The sun is starting to shine, he announced, and we're fixing the roof. And this brought groans from the Labour Party. Well, it is Britain. The sun isn't exactly reliable. George continued to explain how wonderful we were. Within 15 years, we have the potential to overtake Germany, he announced. We choose Germany. He was on a roll. We were giving money for driverless cars, church roofs, energy catapults, white vans. There was racing, orchestras, and something called the Internet of Things. Confused? Well, that's what happens when you walk tall. I love that. Wisdom, you were going to look at something about tax evasion, that whole thing.
I was, but I've changed my mind.
That's really good. That's important.
Absolutely. Yeah,
that's
that's
really good
keep you
as a co-presenter to be able to change your mind on the spot and go for it. Get that tightrope walk out.
Well, on the basis we're going to be talking about tax anyway, I thought I'd choose another story which actually struck me when George Osborne actually said it. And he made an expensive jibe. Well, this is what the FT has said. Agincourt jibe, timely if expensive. So George Osborne was reporting that £1 million is going to be spent on celebrating the Battle of Agincourt. And in his words, the Battle of Agincourt is when a strong leader defeated an ill-judged alliance between the champion of a united Europe and a renegade force of Scottish nationalists. So I was rather surprised that he would say something like that. Well, one is, why spend £1 million on celebrating the Battle of Agincourt? And I know you historians are going to be out there saying we must celebrate it. But why poke a jibe at the Scottish people? As far as I'm concerned, they're our brothers.
Well said. Well said. I think that should be given more coverage. We should make that as some kind of a tweet. You're a Twitter man, aren't you? Why don't you Twitter something on that?
I might tweet it right now.
Twitter and tweet. So, how about this tax? Are you going to cover that now, or do you want to cover that later?
Happy to cover it later on, I think.
Okay. So, Malcolm.
I shall keep my account in Jersey until I hear from you then.
Okay.
The HSBC is investigating all the accounts, I understand. I wanted to talk very briefly about the feel-good factor in the hope that it might lead up to one of my favourite records about happy people. Mm-hmm. I was reading The Sun, which you've just passed me, Wisdom, which is a horrible picture.
Thank you very much,
Malcolm. Chancellor in shorts, and I shall ignore that. I used to work for the Daily Mail, and the first paragraph of any story had to be 10 words, or you're fired. So I thought I'd just look at the first paragraph of the Daily Mail, which seems to convert a lot of these savings into rather large figures. Your savings tax-free up to £100,000. That sounds really good, but I know we'll cover that later. So the first paragraph is, George Osborne yesterday used his final budget before the election to help savers, low earners and home buyers. It's the feel-good factor, actually, that's not just part of the before the election. The misery index is equal to unemployment plus the inflation rate, and that's 5.7% and 0.3%, which is the lowest since the 1960s. And then you've got two other sort of factors to bring in here. One is the GFK, and I don't know what that stands for, and I'm sure you can tell me. And the NOP, Measure of Confidence, has risen by 30% over the past 2 years. And this is a system that's been going for several decades. And finally, the Institute of Fiscal Studies says that living standards are back to pre-recession and real incomes are increasing. So maybe we should feel good about the budget.
So those headlines, just give me some personal comment on that. What are you taking from that? You've been reading those headlines, but what's your personal view on that?
I tried to keep my personal comment back, but if I was forced to say something, I would probably say that it's expected, it's typical, it doesn't really take account of the next 5 years. I do believe that the comments over the next day or two will actually put things in proper light.
But you do feel that there is a hope for optimism, or there's reason for optimism, do you think?
Definitely, but I'm a little bit worried about Zimmer frames coming out of sports cars and pensioners buying up houses and things like that.
With their pension money?
Yes, but I'm sure that's on our
I'm sure
agenda.
it's good for the sports car, so that would boost the economy, because that's the point. I mean, you were making a point earlier, Wisdom, about it's about spend today, and with the hope that it's going to happen tomorrow, something is good is going to happen tomorrow, that I will have an increase in salary in 2 years' time. So
it's an interesting thing that, and this came out of I suppose a blog that I'm not sure if it was Ed Miliband or one of his advisors I think it was Gordon Brown's advisor when he was doing budgets. What he said is that the way they actually prepare budgets, it's not like myself as an accountant where I'll say, okay, what's the reality? What are we actually taking in today? What we've got in the bank? What can we spend tomorrow? They seem to take a much more futuristic, prospective, wishful aspect to their budgeting. So what might we get in the future? Let's spend that today.
And I get a sense of that if, like, it's the direction modelling comes from the top, that if the government is thinking like that, then now the people in the country start thinking like that, which is one of the reasons why there's trillions of pounds in debt, because everybody is spending money they don't have on things they don't necessarily need, in the hope that somehow tomorrow their value of their house will go up, or they'll get a salary increase, or they win the lottery.
Yeah, I guess you're right. You're sort of capitalising your future earnings. Or in the case of the government, capitalising your hopeful future earnings.
Yeah. Then the only thing I think is just to be happy. Just to be happy like Will Ferrell. So, welcome back to Biz Buzz. And happy if you feel like a room without a roof. Or clap along if you feel that the George Osmond's budget yesterday was for you. One of the things we were looking at, we've looked at the headlines, but I wanted to go a little bit deeper now. Personal allowances. I'd like to explore what's the real effect of the budget and who's actually going to benefit. Do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah,
Usman?
absolutely. I think I might be accused of being a poo-poo man again when it comes to my comment. Right, on the positive side, let's look at the personal allowances. They're going up from £10,000 to £10,600 to £10,800 to £11,000 by 2017-18. So over that period, that's a 6% immediate increase and then a 2% per year increase, which if inflation is around about 1%, I know that this month January was very low at 0.3, but generally speaking, we say between 1 and 2%. So yes, for people at the lower end of the wage scale, then, or rather lower levels of earnings, I should say, then yes, there is a bonus here. So we're going to have more of our earnings are tax-free. Although, having said that, if you are used to receiving an age-related allowance, so if you were born before 1948 or 1935, then bad news for you, because the age-related allowance is disappearing from next year.
So what does that actually mean? Is it something that comes in every year, or if you've got it, you keep it?
It was an extra amount of allowance, personal allowance, so it reduced your amount of your income tax, so less of your earnings were taxable. But that's disappearing.
So just explain that once more for me. If somebody is born...
If you or your partner were born before 1948 or 1938, there are two different levels of age-related allowance. Then you got an extra allowance in addition to your personal allowance. So it was a few hundred, up to £1,000 or so
a year.
A year more. So that would equate to £200 to £300 tax if you're earning at 20%. So that's going.
Wow, I wonder how many people actually know that.
Yep. But on the positive side, I should also mention that the higher rate tax band is going to increase slightly at 1%, so not quite tracking inflation. So although they are saying that 100,000 people will be taken out of the 40% band, well, actually, if those 100,000 people actually receive a wage increase, you never know, then actually more people will be caught by the 40% tax band. And then the final point relates to this new £1,000 allowance. So the first £1,000 of your savings interest will be tax-free. Sounds great, doesn't it?
It sounds very good. Malcolm.
Oh, it sounds great, but you have to put this in practical terms.
I could see you stirring in your seat there, Malcolm.
Yeah, slightly. You hear stories about the minimum wage going up 20 pence, and what does that actually mean in real terms, Wisdom? Just correct me here.
If you're on a minimum wage and you're working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for I'd say 38 weeks a year, so it's obviously will exclude anybody on part-time or on 0-hour contracts, then you stand to save a whopping, or gain an extra £380.
Okay, so that's £7.80 a week, perhaps, something like that, maybe a little bit less. Probably your maths is better than mine. But let's look at the other end of the scale then. Let's look at the so-called £1,000 saving. You actually have to have £100,000 in the bank to get a saving on that. And that saving works out at about £250, I believe, a year or something like that. So what sounds good, what sounds like the Daily Mail comment here, your savings tax-free up to £100,000 actually only works out at a couple of £100 a year.
If you've got £100,000 in the bank.
Exactly, and that is my point. So who are we favouring here? It's like the ambition of the Conservatives, should they get back into power, that your house up to £1 million would revoke no tax, no death duties for your family when it's passed on, but between 1 million and 2 million, a nominal sum of maybe a couple of hundred, 20,000 or something like that. So is the tax actually being fair across the board? Is it helping businesses in particular? I'm not sure.
But I'm going to save 5 pence a week on my pints.
And then you can buy me one.
and I'm delighted to say that the price of milk hasn't actually increased as well. So, we've got milk and we've got pints. So I think the ordinary man and his pint and his, the working class families of this country are well kind of looked out for, I would think, are they not? Let's have a look at... Here's one we were going to have a conversation about. This is blurred lines, because we've played Will Ferrell a moment ago, and it seems that there's some blurred lines between this particular song and another well-known track, which we'll talk about when we've played it. What was the controversy over that, Wisdom?
Well, apparently, there's a double controversy. Obviously, it was banned by the advertising standards in 2013 and in many other countries across the world. And I believe it was Edinburgh Students' Union and a number of other organisations banned it from being played because they felt it very much sexualised and took advantage of the female form, so to speak. Although Robin Thicke said that it was about his good girl, which is his wife. But the controversy more recently was really to do with the fact that the backing lyrics, not the lyric, the riffs, was apparently sounded like one of Marvin Gaye's old songs, and so the Gaye family took Robin Thicke and Will Ferrell to court and recently won. Yeah,
I heard on the radio that the family didn't actually know about it at all, but they just heard it on the grapevine.
You're going to play that one now, are you?
I heard it on the grapevine.
No, play it, don't sing it.
Thank you. So what else? The budget. What about the savings subsidy for first-time buyers? Isn't that a good thing? That's got to be a good thing. Come on.
I think it's genuinely good. Yes, what do you think, Malcolm?
Hooray.
I do think it's generally good.
Oh, Malcolm's in as well. Great.
Yeah, no, I'm positive here. No, I've got to be positive sometime.
Shall I explain the sort of basics of it?
Yep, then I'll give you a few facts about why people save and what they actually save.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, the average deposit you need for a house nowadays is about £25,000. So what the government is saying is that they'll introduce these special accounts. Don't know anything more about those accounts and the terms, the interest rates, and whether they'll be tax-free like ISAs. But I think it is probably is going to be an ISA. And then you can save money in those accounts, and they'll pay an extra 25% of what you pay extra. They'll put into the pot, up to £50. So up to £50 a month. So if you're saving £200 a month, you can get £50 put in by the government, and then that will accrue over a period of time. But the maximum the government will put in is £3,000. So if you save £12,000 over a period of 4 years, or 1 year as you wish, then the government will put in an extra £3,000, topping it up to 15, which is sort of halfway towards your deposit. Now, here's the good news. The good news is that it's not dependent upon the house. It's dependent upon you as an individual. So that means with your partner, two of you will get 2 lots of allowances. So between the two of you, if you're saving £400 a week, then you will get your £30,000 average house deposit.
That sounds good.
Genuinely good. Thank you, George Osborne. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm in. Malcolm.
What do you give up? The £400 a week?
Uh-oh.
No, okay. We won't
It was ever thus. It was ever thus,
Malcolm.
It was ever thus.
Enlighten us.
Okay. The typical saver puts away £114 a week. And that's equivalent to, I'll be exact, 8.52% of the average take-home pay. And of those people, 74%, that's 3 in 4, have no goal in mind. Obviously, those people saving for a deposit will have a goal in mind. Lord Hutton, in his wisdom, recommends the minimum combined contribution of 15%. When I say combined, that's from the employer and the employee, of 15% to pension. And the minimum today stands at 2%. Against that, as you probably know, the average fixed-rate account now pays 1.25%. You can get a little bit more than that if you go to India and one or two of their banks, I just found out.
So if you go to?
India. I tried to set up an account in India, which is legal, it's open, and it's protected for the £85,000 protection that you get. And their rate actually, I won't mention the company, of course, but their rate worked out about 1.8, 1.9%. Which I thought was rather good. And the average rate on instant access, which is what most people want, is 0.55%. So what do you do with all the money you're getting? You buy your first house, or what do you do? Tell me more.
Well, I would encourage people to save, although you've just pointed out that they shouldn't save. I think that there's always a value in putting money aside rather than just spending it. Of course, you could invest it in people, in charities, and get a bit more tax relief.
Sorry, we don't have dead airtime. Don't move away from your microphones, gentlemen, just when it starts to get critical.
Well, I suppose that comes down to the whole thing of education, doesn't it? How do you take your budget? Do you plan for the future? And what are you planning for? I think everybody should have goals, and they should think about the future and set those goals, perhaps financially. I know that there are companies out there who help you produce these financial plans and help you look through things like the value of life assurance and how that works. Renting money whilst you accumulate it, I think, is an expression that a certain organisation uses.
Renting money. So you allow your money to be rented out. So
no. I suppose the concept is this: is that when you're young and you've got children, the amount of money you have is very low because it's going on outgoings, on expenses, on bills for your children and for living, basically. So what you do is you put in place some form of income protection, and that means whilst you're alive you pay that, and then in that same time you put some money towards income protection, and you also save a bit of money, so that after 30 years then you've saved a lot of money and you don't need the income protection anymore. And why do you put income protection in? This is just a theory. Why do you put in income protection in the early years? Well, the biggest asset you have is your earning capacity.
We are the asset.
Absolutely.
To the country. Each individual is an asset because we're paying VAT, we're paying tax, we're working to produce something, and we're also paying tax on what we're earning. So we are valuable assets.
You are the key asset. I would suggest that in this country the only assets are the people.
You wonder.
What's more important than people?
Wow, I feel a song coming on. I wish I had Barbara Streisand, but we've got at the moment Sweet Caroline from Neil Diamond. That'll have to do.
Can I explain this one, or will you? I will do. Yes, this is from my wife Carol, but also because I'm a Reading fan. Come on, you R's! And we had a great win on Monday night, and we're off to Wembley.
Isn't it wonderful what we allow you to do here? and your wife's name again is?
Carol.
Carol, yeah, this is for Carol. Sweet Caroline, which we've played for Wisdom's wife Carol, and also for the Reading Football Club. They're both avid supporters of the Reading Football Club, and Reading Football Club are off to Wembley for the semi-final on the 18th or 19th of April. Will you be there?
Well, I hope so, yes. Against the Gunners, and of course we're going to beat them.
Okay. Do you have debentures? Do you have are you season ticket holders?
Up until last year we were season ticket holders, but this year I'm afraid my son's off to university, my eldest son is working, and I've been caught up with other matters, so we haven't been very often this year.
Okay.
I know there's many loyal lawyers out there who are saying, glory hunters.
But they haven't been having a good season this year, have they?
It's been a tough season, yeah. I could get very passionate. I get very passionate about football, and I'll try and tone it down here. Yeah. But yes, it's been a difficult season. Steve Clark, I wish you all the best, and we hope we'll get more players in and start to pull it all together. We have a good squad, good players, but not quite getting there yet.
Well, if you just joined us, you're listening to the Biz Buzz programme on Marlow FM 97.5. That's me, Dermot Fitzpatrick, with you, my co-presenters, Wisdom Costa and Malcolm Parr. And we've been covering some of the aspects of the Chancellor's budget yesterday. And we wanted to move actually to see what the effect might have on our local economy here in Marlow. And Malcolm is going to take that up for us.
Thank you. The last time you kindly let me come on your show, we talked about the high street and the number of retailers who are moving, closing down, going around the corner, being squeezed by rates and rents and the margins and so on. So I've been talking to one or two. There was a meeting this week of the Chamber of Commerce and Trade, and I got some feedback, and I can connect that with the election results a bit. High street shops were given a helping hand with the wide-ranging review promised by Mr. Osborne into crippling business rates. These rates were introduced in Elizabethan times, and the tax is accused of pushing independent shops out of business by charging punishingly high rates. Even as we speak today, 16 high street shops are closing, and it's mainly the independents. And this is what makes, in my mind, the character of the high street. And you may remember I compared it with one or two other dormitory towns, and where by Sunday afternoon things are pretty quiet. Marlow is busy. I spoke to a few of the people being pushed out, and I spoke with Martin Spittle, who is president of the Marlow Chamber of Trade and Commerce. He blames attitude to some degree. He does feel, however, that the review which may well push things onto a sales tax rather than bricks and mortar, could actually do a lot to even things out. Business rates are forecast to raise $22.5 billion in England next year, and is a big, important part of our tax regime. Martin said he felt absolutely appalled at the way that people walk down the high street, no shopping bags, or if they have one, it's empty, and they go into shops, they take photographs of products, and they go out and they go on the internet and buy these damn things. And he just feels that is these same people will happily spend £2, £3, £4 on a designer coffee and walk up and down in front of a hypermarket 5 miles from Marlow, rather than use that saving by not having a coffee out on the streets to buy in their local shops.
So those comments are yours, not they're not attributed to the gentleman from the Chamber of Trade and Commerce.
A bit of both, actually. We had a long conversation. We talked mainly about steam engines, but that's by the by.
I guess
but so the Chamber of Trade and Commerce is very concerned about it, and they discussed this on Monday together with other facts. They felt, for example, that the law about parking, before you get a ticket, you're allowed another 10 minutes in your parking zone before you can get a ticket. That's enough time to rush in to get the newspaper and a bottle of milk or whatever you want. So that might keep people a little bit more local. But it's small beer, and I feel it's going to be a little bit too late for many of the retailers in Marlow High Street.
Because most of the things that... I think if you're selling like that artisan bakery and coffee shop on the corner of the high street, the other side of the high street.
The one that won the Cup of Tea award.
The one that won the Cup of Tea award. That's you can't buy that on the internet. You've got to go in there. You've got to experience that. Whereas I think if you're selling sports clothes or tennis rackets or things like that, those things are readily available on the internet.
Do you think this is just a wild card being thrown in here? Do you think that there is a lack of awareness from people? So people, we really ought to be saying to one another, well, I need to be aware that if I don't buy locally, my business will close. Well, the local business will close, which will lead to a deterioration in the area, perhaps more crime, and it won't be just such a nice place to live. And equally, to everybody, if I don't pay my tax, there'll be less services that we can provide.
I think that's absolutely right. And as my dear friend and Dave Hampton, the carbon coach, would say, and you could apply that also to the very earth that we walk around, if we're not conscious of what we're doing, because it is about unconscious. It's about looking for something that's cheaper, irrespective of the impact and consequences. And of course, if we don't shop in our local shops, then they will go out of business, and what will happen is that multinationals will move in, as has happened. That even there was this lovely organic cafe in Higginson Park, and after the flood, I think it got hurt with financially, and so there's a multinational in there now, and I think that's the nature of the thing. Is if we continue to buy spend our money in these shops, then they will continue to prosper. If we stop buying in the other shops, they will go out of business. That is the reality.
Hopefully an interesting stream of consciousness to develop over the next few months.
A stream of consciousness. Now there's a sentence you don't hear on Biz Buzz very often. Lovely. Thank you for that wisdom. So what else have we got? What else?
The other thing we talked about last time was the amount of traffic and the amount of business that's getting into the business parks in Marlow. And at the last survey, which is some time back, I believe, it was the parks were about 60% full or more, which on average is pretty good. The problem now is getting through the roads, getting parking. There's no restrictions. People double park. So what's happening is that a business group is working with Wickham District Council to look at a multi-storey car parks and other improvements to the area, which would benefit not just businesses but visitors to Marlow, who, after all, are our breadline as well as the businesses. At the moment, cars are blocking Fieldhouse Lane, and the pressure is increasing with jams into and out of town, and pressures on the Marlow Donkey. That's the train, Dermot, not the pub. Which will grow when Maidenhead gets its Crossrail link. WDC spokesperson Catherine Spalton says they're discussing scope of a survey to find the best parking solutions and to look at the area. Marlow's got a lot of small businesses. We've got 9,500 jobs in 361 businesses, of which most of these, 80-90%, are termed as micro, which sounds very rude, but they are our bread and butter.
It's the micros that make it, yeah.
Absolutely. Many of them work from home. It's a high proportion for the country as a whole. Many of them work from home and are self-employed, and it's good to see that superfast broadband will reach 98% of Marlow in the next 12 months.
So we were talking just before that about wills and Wisdom wanted to say something about the inheritance tax.
Yeah, well, here's a little bit of blue sky happy news for you. This is from Ali Hussein in the Sunday Telegraph, who's giving out some inheritance tax tips. So the first thing is start giving away now. So if you've got an estate, you're going to have 2 lots of assets, if you like, 3 lots in fact. You're going to have your normal income coming in. You're going to have your financial sort of cash assets, and you're going to have other assets which are non-financial, so property, jewellery and things like that. So this is what he advises. So first, start giving away cash. You can give up to £3,000 a year, and that will will come out of your estate. So when your estate is then liquidated and you die, there should be less inheritance tax to pay because there's a lower value to it. So start giving that away now, £3,000 a year, or if you're starting this year, you can give away £6,000, 3 for this year and 3 for last year. The next one is
Is that per recipient or in total?
You can give 5 parents can give £5,000 to each of their children. So you're right, it is to individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so grandparents can give £2,500 and anyone else can give £1,000 to anybody. So there are limits as to who you can give it to. But start giving.
Start giving is the king.
Absolutely. The next thing is assets. So your house, aspects of your property portfolio, which I know you have an extensive property portfolio, Dermot.
Thank you.
Right. Let's start giving those away. But you have to survive for 7 years. If you don't survive for 7 years, then some of that value is taken back into your estate for tax purposes and used to calculate your inheritance tax.
But what's the limit of an inheritance tax? Before you start actually paying tax?
Yep. For an individual, £325,000. But if you're a married couple, then that £325,000 allowance can be passed when you pass away to your spouse. So they end up with a £650,000 allowance.
So the person who's receiving it, is there a limit on what they can receive from the estate before they start paying tax?
No, they're gifts. So they
as part of the inheritance. So somebody who inherits £500,000, do they have to pay tax on that £500,000?
No, it's the estate that would pay the tax, responsible for paying the tax, and you get that gift tax free.
So the tax is taken off the estate before it's given.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the estate is the value of the estate is calculated. The tax is calculated
Correct.
on that,
and then quite often, if the estate is in non-cash form, some of that estate may have to be sold. And you see many cases of stately houses and other great big assets sold just to pay the inheritance tax bills. Although there are other schemes where HMRC will come to some sort of arrangement with the estate to say, well, give us a piece of artwork or lend us a certain artwork, and then we'll let you off some of that tax.
And what is the level at which a tax would start on an estate after everything is calculated?
I'll come back to you on that one. Sorry,
okay. No,
it's gone from my head just for a moment.
That's okay.
This could all change too, Dermot, because the last election, the Tories promised that it's not their fault because they had a coalition, so they had to change the tune. But £1 million free of tax for inheritance tax. And I think we may well hear a little bit more about that before the election again. So,
Wisdom?
40%.
40% on at what level? How much does
anything above £325,000 or $650 if it's the second surviving spouse?
Right. Okay.
So let's say, for example, that I inherited $600,000, but that will be covered by parents. Let's say I inherited $1 million. The difference between the 600 odd and the $1 million, I'd pay 40%, even though my tax might be only 10 or 25%.
Right.
Yeah, because it's the estate that pays the tax rather than you as an individual.
So if I have an estate worth £1 million, it starts paying tax. It's taxable over 300 and whatever it also said.
And you'd buy me a pint.
Yes. And I'd buy you a pint, and the pint would just be a penny more expensive than it was.
Penny less.
So, penny less expensive. And I could buy you milk as well, and whatever that was. I think it was exactly the same as it has been for the last 10 years. And finally, there was this point about this comment from I wanted to cover Harriet Green. Artificial intelligence might someday replace hundreds of white-collar workers. And you have something to say about it, because you've got some intel on what's happening in the artificial intelligence world.
Well, we're seeing this already in our own world, and in terms of initially what they call blue-collar workers, so the more menial workers. Quite often in coal mines, for example, when you improve the rate of production, you look at Kodak as technology comes in, that many jobs then are lost because of the new technologies, and many jobs then become redundant. And sorry, now put my head back into gear. Okay, really, we're seeing this the advent of artificial intelligence and what they call collaborative commons, where people can then collaborate together with ideas. And because of the internet, the availability of knowledge, then the barriers to entry in certain trades and certain businesses are becoming lower and lower. You now see people actually giving more and more things away online, and so you get products given away, you get academic courses given away. So there is a whole book and a way of thinking. Jeremy Rifkin is a US economist who has been advising the American government, and he's introduced two books in fact, one called The Third Industrial Revolution and another one called The Zero Marginal Cost Society. The Internet of Things, the collaborative commons, and the eclipse of capitalism. So what he's effectively saying is that more people can do more things. They become prosumers, so they produce things and they consume things. But because of the zero marginal cost, we'll find that bigger companies get bigger and middle-tier jobs just disappear.
So artificial intelligence
would come into that as well. Yes, that's right. More and more you're seeing programs being developed around the world. I know of one specifically in the States where they're looking at the medical aspects of it. So they've created this artificial intelligence. It's a program, a learning program, and they're giving it information. It is learning. It may not be alive, but it's learning as the machine, as the software, the package learns. And then they've let it loose on a hospital, and they've trialled this out at a hospital somewhere in America. I've got someone who can tell you more about this because he's involved with the project. And what they're finding is that the success rates, the diagnoses by the computer, are twice as high or substantially greater than the actual doctors and the consultants. And of course, it's a lot cheaper as well. So we have this worrying situation. Well, I say worrying, it's a challenge. It's the way things are changing, where many professionals could be replaced by programs.
Because I was saying earlier that I know of a nutritionist who uses equipment where she connects up little clips which are connected to a computer on your fingers. And she's able to produce a reading. I think it's bioenergetics or something like that. She's able to produce a reading to work out what the nutrition, what's needed, what my body would need in terms of nutrition. So I could imagine there would come a time where we will be able to connect up electrodes to the body to do readings from head to toe. That would give a more accurate diagnosis of the state of health, and therefore be able to also work out what solutions would be needed. Yeah, that's the kind of artificial intelligence.
And it goes even further. But having said that, it also gives us great opportunities. So we have opportunities, and we should really look on the positive side. And it'd be great to get Mr. Pereira in to talk about really how this could affect us and how we can take advantage of the opportunities that are there because of big society, big data being made available by David Cameron and other people. The data is there, and we can use it to create competitive advantage.
And is he in this country? Mr.
Yes, he is. Yes, he'll come. He's agreed to come on in a few weeks' time.
Excellent. So let's talk about that, because that sounds to me like a really good conversation. I love a conversation like that. We're coming to the end of the program. It's gone very fast. So if you've been listening to us, I'm delighted to have had you along for the journey. We've been exploring the the Chancellor's budget yesterday, breaking it down into different aspects. We've been looking at artificial intelligence. We've been looking at also local news here in Marlow, the shops in Marlow that are moving, closing down, moving to other places. And also had the fact that the personal responsibility we have if we want to keep the shops in our society, in our town vibrant, we need to be shopping in them. And also we were talking about wills and inheritance and making out wills. So it's been quite an interesting journey this afternoon. Malcolm, any final words you'd like to share with us? I'd like to thank you for coming on the programme again, co-presenting.
I've really enjoyed it. I've learnt a lot. Thank you so much. And I think we'll hear a little bit more about the budget and the plans for the next the election very soon. I shall make sure I take my shopping bag when I go on the high street.
And thank you, Wisdom.
Yep, and look forward to seeing you in about 6 weeks' time or so after the election.
Yeah, because you're standing for election and will not be able to present with us for the next couple of weeks. So
yes.
wish you well with that. And thank you very much. It's been great having you with us. Look forward to having you back in a couple of weeks' time. And